Small and mid-sized business owners, there is a war for talent, and I'm going to give you 6 questions in this monologue that you can ask to ensure that the employees you hire are not only the best fit for the job, but will actually care and work hard when no one is looking. Stay tuned. How do you know the next employee that you're going to hire is going to care as much about your business as you do, or at least close to as much about your business as you do? Well, on today's monologue, I'm going to talk through that, and I'm going to share some great questions that I've just recently come across, and I want to share them with you. Now, I am well trained and steeped in competency selection interviewing, and I write about it in my book, An Insider's Guide to Business. It's available on Amazon. All proceeds go to charity. But what I talk about is, competency selection interviewing, which I learned from a company that was acquired by Korn Ferry, large, one of the world's largest recruiting firms. And competency selection interviewing is just really asking past performance questions. Like, how did you perform in the past? Tell me about the way you thought, the way you felt. What were you saying out loud? Was it a phone call? Was it a Zoom meeting? Was it in person? Why did you get with that person? And you really get to understand how people make decisions. It is so much more effective than interviewing with, your gut. Like, I really think this guy's got it. Or, I don't know if she answered the questions that well, but I have a feeling about her. Those are terrible interviewing questions, and they're terrible interviewing tactics. And those decisions are almost always suboptimal, and you end up with turnover and poor employee relations. And so we want to use competency selection interviewing to make sure we have the best people. And the one that we I hired a consultant, brought him in, taught my team, and we use a format called Parla. And long story short is, it allows us to ask, what was the problem and what was the action you took? What was the result that you saw? What did you learn from it? And how have you applied this, right? And so you really get to go through these deep stories and understand, was somebody steering the ship and actually making the decisions, or were they just on the ship during this project or during this marketing initiative or this build or whatever it happened to be? And the competency selection interviewing will get you past that. However, this I just came across and I wanted to share it with you. And it's, how do you know if they're actually going to care about your business as much? So one, we have to do competency selection interviewing to make sure that they have the competencies, that they have the skills. Well, we can teach the skills, I should say. Do they have the traits? Do they have the traits we're looking for? Because we can teach a skill. We can't teach a trait. We can't teach work ethic. You can't teach someone to care. You can't teach someone to be empathetic, at least not in the short term, right? But you can teach somebody how to sell. You can teach somebody how to do customer service. You can teach somebody engineering. You can teach somebody how to build a prototype, right? But you can't teach a trait. A skill is teachable, a trait is not. But how do you know if somebody actually gives a shit, right? Gives a shit, right? And so, and I say that tongue in cheek because I'm going to share with you, this is a founder. I'm looking at my phone here. This is a founder who made a post, a Silicon Valley founder, who made a post about his number one hiring criteria is around, does somebody give a shit, right? And how do you find that out? He said, because I can hire for all these other traits, I can hire for these skills and experience, but how do I know how they're going to act when they come through the door that first day of work? And are they going to care as much and go the extra mile? So we ask these questions, and these are so simple, but so telling. So check this out. He asks, what is the hardest you've ever worked on something? So that question, what is the hardest you've ever worked on something? So that question is going to elicit something that they cared about, because if they worked the hardest on it ever, they probably cared about it. Maybe they didn't, but we're going to find out. And then he asks, how many hours were you working per week during that hardest challenge you've ever worked on? Interesting, right? Well, I'd put in 40 or 42 hours. That's different than somebody saying, wow, man, that week, now I don't normally like to do this because I have a family, I want a balanced life, but that week I was doing 60, 65, 70 hours. In fact, we did that for about 6 weeks straight to get this done. Okay, that's interesting data point. Third question, why did you work so hard? Why did you care? So here's the hardest thing I've ever worked on. Here's how long I had to work on it and how many hours per week. Then he asks, why did you work so hard? Like, what a great question. Well, my boss told me to. That's not the right answer, right? Why did you work so hard? And why did you care? That is going to elicit a wonderful response that is going to be rich for you to ask follow-up questions when you're interviewing. And then, when were you the most unmotivated in your life? Wow. And that's a legal question, right? We're not asking anything about relationships. When were you the most unmotivated in your life? Well, if it's around work, if it's around working with a team that they couldn't get along with, it's going to be really telling. Or if it's, geez, when I just had to do the same work over and over and I couldn't have any input and it was just boring work. Well, we know this person needs to care about what they do. They have to give a shit, which is what he calls his, give an S questions. So what's the thing you're most proud of? So the fifth question after, when were you, when in your life were you the most unmotivated? And then the next question is, well, what's the thing you're most proud of? So hopefully a lot of this starts to line up for the person and you get a real rich understanding of who they are and why they like to be challenged or why they don't like to be challenged. And do they care? Do they give a crap or do they not? And then, do you think it was worth it? What a fantastic question. Do you think it was worth it? And he goes on, he says, the uncomfortable truth is that most people don't give a shit. So, for example, it's absolutely shocking that the common paradigm for engineers at big companies is to come in at 11 a.m. and leave at 4 p.m. And in no world can working 5 hours a day equate to giving a shit, right? So I love how he goes about this in, hey, I got to find the right candidates. I have to make sure they have the skills. If they don't, I got to be able to teach them those skills. They have to have the traits. If they don't have the traits, I can't teach them that. But the number one trait he looks for is, do you care? Do you care? And while none of this is rocket science, I challenge you, are you asking these questions? Do you have these 6 questions built into your interview acumen, your interview approach? I can tell you that for our franchise brands and our companies, these questions have now become a module that we go through our regular competency selection interviewing process. We never shortchange that. Then we say, yes, this person is a good fit, or no, they're not a good fit. But if they are a good fit, then we're now going to ask these 6 questions and find out, do you really care? Why do you really care? When have you cared most? When were you the most unmotivated? Was it worth it? These are going to be great questions that I know will augment our ability to hire the best talent, because listeners, at the end of the day, business is a war for talent, because the best talent can produce the best results with the right leadership, which means you will have the best business, but you have to have the right people. And for leaders and business owners, small and mid-sized business owners that are complaining, I can't find any good people, the labor pool sucks, there's not enough good people out there, I would challenge you and say, you are not interviewing in an optimal manner. You're not interviewing with a framework that is repeatable so you can compare apples to apples. And I would also challenge you, you're probably not asking these questions around, do you really care? When have you been really engaged? What was the most challenging thing that you loved? When were you the most unmotivated? How long did you work? Was it worth it? Like, these kind of questions will round out your picture, and you'll be allowed to hire the best people and the best player on the field, right? You can field the best player every single time because you will have hired the best players. So good luck with this. Knock them dead. Thank you for tuning in to the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any of the resources that we mentioned during the podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. You can connect with me on any of the socials at Real Roger Martin. And be sure to check out our website, ThriveMoreBrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thanks again for tuning in.